Welcome to episode 1 of All Guitars Buzz. This is a podcast where I talk about my life as a repair person, what guitars have hit my bench this week, funny customer stories. We're going to look at some guitar news that's happening. We might even take a look at some local shows that are happening that are cool. And I wanted to start this podcast for a while. I have a YouTube channel where I started documenting some of my repairs, and I twirl or spin one guitar a day, which I've been pretty adamant about for the first year. That's pretty cool. Cool story, bro. So, guitars I've worked on this week. This is really going to be like the past few weeks, maybe, just to kick it off. I'm refinishing a guitar for my friend Daniel. He plays in a band called Resurrects, and it's his number one. It's an LTD. I think it's an LTD and not an ESP. I might have that backwards, but it kind of looks like a Coronet or Wilshire, the body shape, but it has a Tele loadout, and the paint that was on there is poly. And if you know the difference between a nitro finish and a poly finish, then you'll know what I'm talking about. If you don't, here's what's up. A nitro finish kind of ages with the wood and is susceptible to smoke. It could turn yellow. It could kind of seep into the open grain a little bit if there is open grain. And if you wanted to spray lacquer on top of lacquer, it kind of melts in. And so it's kind of a more organic style to finish a guitar with. A lot of the high-end boutique guitars are finished in nitro, and people pay up for that because kind of nasty to spray. And anyways, there's poly as well. And what that is essentially it kind of looks like a lot of the budget guitars, even guitars that aren't budget, guitars that are up in the thousands, but basically what it is it's polyurethane, and it almost looks like plastic. It looks like your guitar was dipped in plastic. And to try to remove that finish is hard. It's a task. There's several ways to do it. And so the way I've been doing it is with heat. And if you go on YouTube and you type this in, there's a lot of different folks that do it with heat. And a lot of them, I'm surprised they aren't wearing protection to protect not only your face from the shards of poly that are going everywhere, but the fumes. And so I wear a full respirator mask when I'm doing it. But basically, you get a heat gun, and I suppose you might be able to do it with a blow dryer, but I would highly suggest a heat gun to do it. And you heat up a spot, and it might even start to bubble. And you can get in there with kind of a blunt scraper, or, I had never done this kind of a thing. And when I started researching it, everybody was saying like a metal scraper that wasn't super sharp. It was like an older one would work good for this. And then there were other folks that were using plastic scrapers, which actually the heat gun can melt. And so I decided to get this whole party started, kind of a chisel I had. It's like a 1-inch chisel, and it's not super sharp. It is, I did sharpen it, but it's not super sharp. And so anyways, when you put the heat gun on the poly, it starts to bubble, and I can kind of take the chisel and tilt a corner in, and it takes off a little piece, and then you could get your chisel under there, and it just starts coming off. That's the best case scenario. It's almost like you're when you take a block plane and you plane a piece of wood and you get a nice shaving. It's kind of like that, but you'll get hung up in some spots, and you'll have to you start to realize that heat is a huge part of what's happening there. So heat is very important. So I put my heat gun in a vise. It was kind of an awkward position, and I had the guitar on my lap, and the heat gun was pointing in a spot, and I was taking my chisel and doing scraping the poly off. And that works pretty good for most of the front and most of the back until it got to the corners, which have a round over, and then the sides. And so that was a whole thing. And my coworker, for those of you who don't know, I work in a very busy, popular guitar store in San Diego, and there's just so much repairs going on, which I'm very thankful for. So I'm super busy at work all the time, and I work with a handful of really great people. Couple of the old timers that own the business, I love learning tips and tricks from them because they've been doing it since the very beginning of guitar repair, which I would call like the early 70s, really. And so anyways, my coworker, not one of the old timers, someone who's my age, he discovered these plastic razor blades, and he uses them to get stickers off of guitars. And you could use a blow dryer in that case, lightly heat up the sticker, and then use these plastic razor blades to just scrape the stickers right off. It works really, really good. And so I got a bunch of those to work the sides of this ESP and the corners. And as of now, the poly is gone from the back and the sides, just the round over remains. And when you're looking at the guitar, it almost looks like it has black binding, but that's the poly there. And so it's going to be something to remove that, but I'm still not done with it. And kind of the nasty thing, so the black came off. By the way, I'm going to refinish this black lacquer, black nitro. But there is it almost feels waxy sealer coat. And so I believe the body might be alder or ash. I'm thinking alder. And so I'm still trying to decide whether or not I should take that off or leave it. When I start sanding it with my orbital sander, it might just start taking that stuff off. I'm worried about how it will react to the nitro. So I might just take it off. But Daniel likes his guitars black, like completely black, and the poly was starting to chip off, and he had taken Sharpie and tried to fill those in. This guitar is very important to him, and I have to say it was set up awesome. And so the action was super low. You know that cliche, as low as it could go with no buzz. But this one had it. It was low with like jumbo. It was low with like jumbo style frets, and it's a killer guitar. And so I might show it on my channel. But anyways, so I did that. That's been kind of taking up my time. I've been doing just a little bit every other morning or so right before I go to work. And then another interesting project that I'm doing. So we sell a lot of used amps and consignment pieces. And an amp that we own is an old 50s Pro. And it has a new cab and new speaker, but the guts are real. I think it's been recapped too. It's had a lot of work, but the amp is real, but the cab is, a brand new cab. So the owner of the shop asked me to basically lacquer it or shellac it. I think I'm going to brush on shellac, and I might even relic it. I kind of have free artistic, a pass to do what I want to it to make it look more sellable. And, I'm not sure that I can screw it up on the relicing, as long as it's done tasteful, where there would be wear, not just taking a piece of sandpaper like you see on some of these early relic guitars, like the Joe Strummer Telly. It just looks so bad. Is right before, now you could go on eBay, type in MJT, and you'll see true, masters of relicing where it looks really good. But anyways, I might just do a light relic. Maybe I will get some, dirt, rub it in there, and I don't know. Or maybe I'll just leave it. Less is more. I'm totally that guy. It's easy to take something too far and ruin it, and I always think about that and try not to do that. So that's something interesting I'm doing. I recently just took the amp apart. I took the chassis out. I took the speaker out, and now it's just the box. and it's just sitting in my shop, and I'm thinking about how to go about it. A friend of mine shellacked an amp once, and it came out too thick and too orange. It's a tweed amp, by the way, a Fender Pro 115. It's killer. It breaks up at low volume, definitely for a specific style of music. I always say that older Fender amps, really, it's like a fine wine. It pairs well with certain things, but it's not like a Hot Rod Deluxe where you could plug any guitar into it and really any pedal and it's going to sound amazing. You know, I have a 66 Deluxe Reverb. That's my dad's, and I played that all throughout my childhood. And, you know, I noticed from a young age back when I had my first pedal, which was probably, I had a DS1 and then my dad's Electro Harmonix Big Muff Pi. It's the smaller one. It's the little Big Muff. Actually, yeah, the little Big Muff. And so I had those two pedals. Only recently have I started to like fuzz and appreciate it for what it is, even through the big, you know, boom of boutique pedals. But, you know, I think that also is very specific to a style of music. So without going into too much description of what I like and why I like it and blah, 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 back to my point, you could put a DS1 through a Hot Rod Deluxe and it's going to sound pretty good. You might sound like Kurt Cobain. And then you plug it into a 66 Black Panel Deluxe Reverb. Everything is way more exaggerated, you know, with the same settings. So that's something I noticed early on. But anyways, this Pro is a killer amp, and I'm doing that to that. That makes sense. And on my bench recently, I'm basically just looking through my camera roll because I take a lot of videos and pictures of the stuff. I worked on a guitar called a Petros recently, and it's acoustic guitar. It was like a grand concert size probably. And I had never heard of these guitars. They go for like $10,000 used, I think, from what I saw. They go for a lot of money. And whenever I work on a guitar and I'm unfamiliar, I like to look it up and see what's going on and just how much, you know, time I should take with it, basically. And so everything on it was pristine, by the way. The saddle looked like it had been carved on a CNC, and it was compensated expertly, and the nut wasn't a typical shape. You know, it was beautifully made. This is made by one guy. You know, everything was perfect. It's a steel string guitar, not a classical. And so, you know, when I look at the work order, because this isn't, usually I work on guitars one of two ways. I write the guy up, and therefore I take on the work. Or for some reason jobs are unassigned. It could be any number of reasons, and then I'll snag it that way. So this was one of the latter, where it was unassigned, and he called, and I started talking to him, and then I kind of took on the job. So I was just noticing all these little details that were just perfect. And he had unbleached, I think it was elk bone for the nut and the saddle. And he wanted new tuners. The tuners were excellent. Like, they weren't cheap tuners. Like I said, everything on this guitar is nice. And then he wanted a Fishman system. I can't remember the name of it, but it was an older system. And it was one of these systems that has, like, you know, two knobs, but it's not like the LR bags where it's a small kind of 1-inch circuit board that you double stick to the top near the sound hole. This went like half moon, like around the sound hole. And so the issue I had with it is a brace was in the way. And so I could kind of awkwardly have those controls placed to where you actually saw a little bit of the circuit board, and it didn't look attractive. And this is when I try to get in the mindset of the customer. The tuners were great, but he provided other ones where the tuner was actually wood instead of plastic. See, this guy really cares about appearances, and so I thought he probably wouldn't like that circuit board. Called him up, talked to him, super nice guy. And I sent him a picture, but he actually came in and looked at it with me and said, yeah, I don't like the look of that. I was trying to push him to an LR Baggs Anthem, because that's essentially what this old Fishman, I think it was discontinued in 2013. That's what it was doing. It had a mic and it had an under the saddle braid, and the mic really wasn't working as a mic like on the Anthem. It added air, quote unquote. So very interesting. And it took 2 AA batteries, and the battery mount had a brass bar mounted on the bottom. It was just very like old school, and I don't like to put like older stuff in a newer guitar, but here's the thing. He has another one of these guitars, and he wanted this guitar exactly like the other one. And so that included low action. And anyways, he actually brought in his number 1 for me to measure, and I took all these pictures and measurements, and I was going to try to match. And man, the action was low on his number 1. Remember, acoustic steel string guitar. I think the action was something like, gosh, it might have been like 60 thousandths on the bass. That's right. And like 30 thousandths on the treble. Something like that. It wasn't buzzing. Really. If you play hard, it will. And so I was careful about how I proceeded, and I told him a big part of repair is setting the customer's expectation. So I made sure and told him that, I'm not a CNC. I think this saddle was made with a CNC. I'm a person, with a file and a belt sander and a buffer. And I'm going to try to make this as close as I can. But you're going to have, once I buff it out, it's going to look like jewelry. And it did. I did a pretty good job. Everyone I showed it to was really impressed. And so that's a feather in your cap. But yeah. So anyways, what I wound up doing for the pickup to not make that circuit board stick out is you kind of make a shim. And I made it out of spruce. I'm not sure if this is making sense. I'm trying to describe it as good as I can, but you have to do that sometimes. And will it change the tone of the guitar? I don't think so. I'd be more concerned with putting something in back of the bridge. I kind of think of that where the speaker is kind of pumping, where the box is pumping. I've had this discussion before with some coworkers about, I made a pick guard that I put on I think it was a Martin, 60s Martin 12 string or something like that. And it was big, one of those big country ones that almost covers a whole guitar, but the back was not covered. And so anyways, but the 12 string had a pickup, and he plugged it in, the customer. He wanted the look, and that turned out cool too. Anyway, so that was a guitar that was a big one that was on my bench that I've been working on really for like a month. I finally got that out. He liked it. The pickup wound up sounding great. And as far as the action goes, I got the neck where it had slight relief. And when you're talking slight relief, I always like to say major relief. That's where it looks like a skateboard ramp. Relief, that's going to be more than slight relief. Slight relief is something you could usually see where it almost looks straight, but it has a little bit. And that would be anywhere from maybe 9 to maybe like, I don't know. 8 to 14 thousandths. That might be too much, but just you're eyeballing this stuff. And then straight, I would call anywhere from 4 to, I don't know, 7. It depends, the relief is different on both sides. But when you're looking at a neck and you try to make it dead straight without taking measurements, you're just eyeballing it from the nut down to the end of the fingerboard. A lot of times it's actually backbowed, and you can do the tap test to check that out. But anyways, I knew I had some wiggle room, so I made it where I would typically put an acoustic guitar, or at least a customer that wants it low. I put it at kind of like what a Les Paul would be, like 80 thousandths to 60. I might put a Les Paul at 70 thousandths on the bass, but anyways, I put it there, which is low for an acoustic, and knowing, because the neck had slight relief and the nut wasn't too low, that I could, if he wanted it lower, I could just tighten the truss rod. And that's kind of how I fine-tuned it, and it wound up being maybe 70 thousandths to I don't know, 50. That's freaking low. And if you laid into it, it got a little buzzy, but if you're finger picking, it was fine. And so he was really happy with it. So I have some adjustability. There was actually factory shims that came in the case, so I actually knew that if I went too low, I could do that. In fact, when the guitar came in, there was a factory shim in there already. So yeah, that's the Petros. Then I was working on a 70s or 80s Ibanez acoustic guitar, and that one came in buzzing, and I'm still working on it actually, but it had a bunch of high frets, and the bridge was cracked, and when I put glue, it was cracked all along the holes of each string. I don't know if you've seen that before. So I just put CA glue in there, and then I would sand, and the dust would fall back in to the cracks, and I'd put some more CA glue on. So yeah, I'm still working on that, taking my time. The customer loves this guitar. I have a feeling he's had it for a very long time. So that's one on the bench. What else? Oh, today I'm rewiring a Epiphone Casino, and got some boutique pickups that are included in there. And a coworker of mine that makes pickups walked by and said that it was actually a lot of boutique companies, I guess, get their parts from, gosh, I'm just blanking on the name, but some major supplier of kind of like pickup kits. And so he said that it was from a kit, even the box it came. But, this guy's putting his sticker on it. That's fine, right? I mean, I guess it would be like taking a Heath kit and, kind of tweaking and building what you want. And then you put a sticker on it that says, Hillington amp or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting just to work with a lot of smart people around you constantly. It's very interesting. But he took a look at the bobbin, and he said not only was it sagging a little bit, but the pole piece spacing on P90s, which is what it was a P90 pickup. Traditionally it wasn't made for Gibson, the spacing. Very interesting. So I have one. I might have taken it home though, but I like to make work boards for when I'm rewiring a semi-hollow guitar or a hollow guitar, but anything from a Gretsch to a 335 to a Casino to a Sheraton, etc. And so what I usually do is on a piece of MDF, I'll trace the whole body. That's right. Even the F-holes, I'll put a piece of printer paper down, tape it down, and I'll scratch where all the holes are with my fingernail, and it makes an outline. I'll trace that in Sharpie. I'll spray stick it to the MDF. I'll drill all the holes. But this time I only made a little section of it, but I made sure to include the F-hole. And so the point of that is cable management and how much cable to have. I always like to leave a little slack. But I finished that today. It took me like all day. But yeah, I did that, and I tested it. I wired in the pickups. It worked. That's good. I made it pretty robust because you're, fishing it through. But I'm going to install it tomorrow. So that's one that took me a while. Trying to think of what else was interesting this week. Yeah, there's been so much stuff. There was a 60s Music Master that came in, red. I don't know if that's Dakota red or what. But it's like a darker red. If you look up, 66 Music Master, you'll see that red. There's like a blue and a red. And this one is, it has a bunch of chips on it, and it has a white base coat, and that's what the other ones on Reverb I saw had. So, yeah, but not too appealing. I like when a guitar has wear, but if you're seeing white, like there's red's the color of the guitar, and then there's a chip, and you could see white underneath that. It's kind of, But, yeah, the owner kind of wants a lot for it. I'm trying to think of if it's like 17. There's not the original case, so it's just the guitar. and there were stickers all over it, which he took off. But you know what's really cool about these? I'm a Tele guy and a Mustang guy as well. I've owned a lot of Mustangs and sold them all. I always sell them. I still have a few Mustang projects I'm working on, but it's basically a Telecaster and a Mustang combined with that bridge on those Music Masters. And man, it has single pickup, neck pickup. That's a really cool one. Something else that happened to me last week that was pretty cool. A customer of mine, his name is Sam, and I work on a lot of his projects, and he's always super cool with me. Sometimes, I shouldn't say, basically all the time, he lets me keep the old pickups. He'll bring in cool, pickups for me to install, and he'll say, oh, I don't need those ones. You could just have the old ones. And they're usually very cool pickups, Gretsch pickups, Rickenbacker pickups, which is really cool because I have a pickup tester guitar and I like to record with them, and I kind of have a pickup collection. So that's super cool. So we've got a good rapport, and I've worked on a lot of projects throughout the years, and randomly, okay, so he had 2 Stratocasters, and one, this is going to get very, I'll try not to say this a whole bunch. I think people at work might make fun of me because I'm always saying I'm dyslexic. I haven't been tested, and it's probably a mild case, but when there's 2 options, sometimes I get confused. So that makes guitar repair actually a little bit more difficult for me because I have to, that's also why I make those templates for the wiring harnesses for the semi-hollow, because you put the pots on it, you put the jack on it, the switch on it, and there's the cutout where the F-hole is, so I could see where to manage the cable, but then you flip it upside down. And see, for me, I need to label everything, so he had 2 Strats. I think one was a 70s black Strat. It was pretty heavy. We'll just call it the heavy one, with a maple neck, and it buzzed, and I tried to set it up and get the buzz to stop, but something wasn't right. I don't think it was the neck that originally went on there either. So, and in the past I've converted a 4-bolt or a 3-bolt to 4-bolt for him, and so so there was some mismatched parts on there, but nevertheless, it wound up being a 70s Strat. And then he had another 70s Strat. We'll call that the lighter one. It was tuxedo. It was white and black, white pickguard with a maple neck again. And I believe that the neck is 70s and the body is 80s. So it's not exactly 70s Strat. What he wanted was on the tuxedo one, he wanted the neck off that one because that one played great. That one set up no problem. Low action, probably on a Stratocaster is probably 80 thousandths on the bass and like either 70 or 60 on the treble. So he wanted that feel on the heavy one. So I took, he wanted the white pickguard on the heavy one, so turning the heavy one into a tuxedo. It was blacked out. And basically swapping the plastic, swapping the necks. So I had converted the 3-bolt neck to a 4, and I had to unconvert it, but I didn't fully unconvert it. Instead of reinstalling that little plate that's in the 3-bolt, I took it off and I filled it with a piece of hardwood. Instead, I found a thicker neck screw, and I threaded it into the back of the neck, and then I cut the screw short so it was the same size as the machine screw was. And I just did that. So it's still a 3-bolt, but now the 3rd bolt is going into wood. So I did a swap on those, and so then the Strat that he liked, that he favored, and by the way, it worked. Swapping the necks got rid of the buzz on the guitar that he liked. And so he was stoked with the heavy one. And the other one, which actually I fancied, I'm not much of a Strat guy, but I liked it. The other neck that didn't work on the other one worked on this one. It was pretty low action, and that guitar was now blacked out, the black on black. He just gave it to me. He said, for all the work that you've done throughout the years, just have it. And that is freaking awesome. And even though I'm not a Strat guy, my first guitar was a Strat, still got it. And I think I'm going to play that guitar for a long time. It's great. 70s headstock, an 80s body, black pickguard, black. I think here's the thing. The body looks poly. We're talking about the finish on the ESP. Sometimes, sorry, my phone there. Sometimes they would spray nitro over poly and it kind of gets blurry in the 70s. But yeah, anyways, I'm super stoked on that guitar. So that's something cool that happened last week. By the way, I didn't write any of this stuff down. I'm just like flying by the seat of my pants here. Maybe it would be better if I wasn't so stream of consciousness for the next one, but looking through my camera roll. Okay, I don't know if any of you all sell on Facebook Marketplace, but man, what a disappointment that is, right? Like, the market is so excuse me, so soft. And for the shop that I work at, it's not soft. It's good. And that's interesting, right? I think it has a lot to do with the reputation. People aren't willing right now to like take a risk, really. Even though you could go and try something out, I guess. It might be awkward to say after you hit them up on Marketplace, yeah, let's meet. And then you're like, oh, no, thanks. And walk away. I don't really know. Yeah, I haven't heard of that happening much. Unless they make it clear, hey, I just want to check it out, and I might not get it. But nevertheless, the market is soft out there if you're not a retail store. And so, but I sell on Marketplace all the time. Man, I am on there. I've really stopped looking at Instagram, stopped doom scrolling it. And I'm more doom scrolling Marketplace now. So, yeah, man, that means I'm in the bathroom doing my business until my butt is numb on Marketplace, and I am scrolling. I'm looking at drill presses, drum sanders, and guitar stuff, and I'm also selling stuff. So, yeah, as a repair tech, I have a storage locker just full of projects that I haven't gotten to. And actually, the reality of a lot of builders is they wind up doing tech stuff because it's good money and there's always stuff there to do, and it's more consistent than building. And I recently just got a CNC, and I have my own shop, and I'm trying to put the CNC together. It's an alt mill, and it's a alt mill 4x4, and so far I've gotten the frame, but that's as far as I've gotten. And before I had an Origin Shaper, or is it Shaper Origin? And that's a handheld smart CNC kind of. And that's kind of how I cut my teeth into designing stuff on Illustrator and, yeah, kind of 2D stuff. But now I'm going to move into the 3D world. But anyway, so the projects are just never ending. So every now and then I just sell something as is. So on Marketplace, I have a Cordoba. It's a C, maybe a CE. I don't know, something. It's a classical. It has a cutaway. It has a Fishman pickup, and it's very cool, except it has a hole. It's probably a little smaller than a dime, but might be close to that size on the upper bout. How that got there, I don't know. That's probably why it was given to me. So, I'm not a classical player. Yeah, it would be cool for recording, but I just want to sell it. And so these retail, I think, for like $6, and I put it up there for $250, thinking someone would kick me for down to $2. And you would not believe, or maybe I should take that back. You probably would believe, just a whole bunch of just crap messages. And this one guy, he said, I want it. Can you meet now? And I said, no, I'm available tomorrow. And he said, well, I'm not available tomorrow, I'm available now. And I said, okay, well, sorry. And he just wouldn't leave me alone. He just kept messaging me. And so I just ignored him. And then pretty soon I got a message from a different person, but he had the same like sentence structure as the other guy. So, I just ignored that too. This guy, this must be a month later. He keeps hitting me up. Hi, he'll say. Or I want this guitar, or whatever. And I guess I'm not that desperate to, want to meet up. You might be thinking, well, why didn't you just make it happen? You got a bite on the line, And that's true. I guess it depends how desperate you are. And on Marketplace, I'm all about, like, if you're nice and if you're serious, I don't want someone to waste my time. And when I feel like someone's going to waste my time, I just don't kind of respond to it. And that's just because I'm kind of beat up from Marketplace. It's beat me down. So that's, where I'm at. If people think that they can just lowball me and be mean to me and, then I certainly can just not answer. I'd rather just not answer than be mean to a stranger. I don't really like being mean to anybody. So, anyways, this leads me to this story about the Cordoba. So I thought, well, I'm a repair person. I'll fix it. So the top is spruce. So I got I opened it up into a perfect circle because it wasn't, with a Christmas tree bit. And then I got a plug cutter and I found a piece of spruce that had almost an identical grain pattern. I cut it, I glued it in there, and then once it dried, I took it down with a chisel, and then I put super thin CA glue and it kind of seeped into there, kind of making it hard. And then I did it again to where it was proud. Then I took a razor blade and I scraped it. And then I filled it with super glue one more time because sometimes you get pinhole like little bubbles. And that's where it's at now. I still got to scrape it flat, and then I'm going to buff it, throw on some Salvarez, and then I'm going to ask $275. What do you think about that? and I'm going to say, that it's set up. It's got a fresh set of strings. It's staying in tune. I might even add a video of a guy I know playing it who's, a badass guitar player. And how do you like them apples? And if no one buys it, I'll put it on consignment at the shop. What do you think about that? That's what I'm talking about. Oh, man. Marketplace. There was a Polytone amp I had from the 70s, and it was in storage again, and it's just sitting there. And I'm thinking to myself, actually, I was at my storage just doing some cleaning, and I thought, I'm going to take this into the shop, plug it in as my bench amp for a while, just kind of see, how it sounds. I have an eclectic amp collection, and I like good sounding solid state amps. Usually nothing new. I collect these vintage amps called Jordan. They're solid state. I think they sound incredible. It's that transistor sound when you can hear it. And so the Polytone is like the king of it really did have that transistor, almost like an analog console, like a good, anyways, super clear, super quiet. It looked beat, and the front didn't have a regular grill cloth. It had what looked like a Radio Shack, extruded, with all those holes to grill to protect the speaker, like a metal grill. And that's how some of them came, so that's stock. Anyways, I put it up on Marketplace after playing it for a little bit, and I think I put it for $150. And someone messaged me saying, I know those amps, those are super cool amps. I have one actually, but you'll never sell it for that. The nerve of these people, they don't know me. You could see on my Facebook profile, it says when you hit view profile, you could see where I think you could see the about me. Actually, I'm not sure. It might be private, but yeah, so I guess in that case they wouldn't know. But if it was public, you would see that I work at the guitar shop. So don't tell me about selling stuff, buddy. But anyways, I was showing it to a bunch of the regulars at work, some jazz people that are there, like, not trying to sell them on it, going, hey, and honestly, I kind of wanted to keep it. It's like when you watch the American Pickers and the people that called Mike and Frank actually fall in love all over again with their stuff, and then they don't want to sell that. That's kind of what it was like. You know, for $150, just keep it, man. It's a cool amp. But anyways, so I showed it to my regular Mark, and he plays jazz, and he just loved it. And he also likes to fix up amps, and the reverb wasn't working, and he said he wanted to buy. I said 150. He said no. I said what? He said 200. I said, come on, Mark. I said, and he said no. He said I wouldn't feel right about it unless I gave you $200. So he did. And then he changed out the speaker, even though that sounded incredible. It was a little heavy, the magnet. It might have been an EV speaker. It had like one of those huge round magnets, but and then he got the reverb fixed, changed the tank. That was the issue, and he loves that amp. Isn't it cool how things just kind of, you know, work sometimes? They fall into place. But yeah, the marketplace, man, stuff is super soft, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Worked on a lot of Gretches in the past month. I guess I worked on one, but a Country Gentleman with a Gretsch rail pickup. I guess you'd call, well, TV Jones calls them Powertrons. I don't know what Gretsch calls them, but I'm a Gretsch guy, by the way. I'm talking on the first episode like you know me. I kind of have like rockabilly roots, and so I like Gretches, but recently I stopped playing them live because first of all, I don't want to take my 64 double cut Chet Atkins to, you know, some bar on El Cajon Boulevard, but also I kind of fallen in love more with Telecasters, and at least the Telecaster loadout I'm a fan of now. But anyways, there was a 60s, probably a 64 Country Gentleman with a Powertron in the neck. Never seen it. It had Gretsch rot to the max, and I did a tune-up on that, and then a while later an identical guitar in mint condition came to be put on consignment, and one of my coworkers bought it, and it was incredible. And speaking of Gretsch, there's this other regular, actually he used to work at my shop. He's like a character kind of a guy, funny guy, but he has a double cut Chet Atkins. I think it's a 65, and you know, he was showing it to me because he thought that for one, I might be interested, or for two, I might know I can throw out my feelers about, you know, he wants to sell it, I guess, quote unquote wants to sell it. So it has Gretsch rot, it has all the typical things, and it didn't play great, and it, you know, it needs work. And so when you go on Reverb, how I like to price things is I look for what sold, not for what people are asking. And you get the average based on condition. And yeah, Reverb will show you like a little chart or whatever, but I think looking at the individual listings that have sold is more accurate. And so you could see that those are going for anywhere from 19 to 3, depending on condition, right? And that's the whole thing. It boggles my mind that Gretsch's, you know, in this case, it almost looks like a Mickey Mouse ear, similar to 335. You know, those 60s 335s go for a lot of money. And these Gretsch's, what, top out at 335? Crazy, right? But yeah, they do need the plastics. The issue, okay, I guess if you don't know what Gretsch rot is, I'll describe it as like the plastics rotting off, and what happens is they off gas, and it also turns the gold hardware green. So this happens when the guitar is kept in the case, which is so crazy, but the plastics start to off gas, the gas has nowhere to go, and it starts attacking the gold hardware, and it's just not good for your vintage Gretsch. And in fact, the guy that brought his in for consignment, I said, how'd you keep it so clean? He said, I never kept it in the case. See, people that know. You don't even have to say anything about the gas. We were, you know, he knew. And anyways, so this one was poor condition. And the guy said, well, you know, Guitar Center wanted to buy it off me for $3,000. And I was like, Yeah, right. He kind of plays hardball, this guy. He's a collector, doesn't play, by the way, and doesn't really like to sell, even when he acts like he wants to sell. I'm friends with this guy. He's a nice guy, but a funny guy. So, anywho, and so I would really price that guitar at, honestly, 19 or 2. I would, just based on the Gretsch rot and the tarnish of the hardware. And he goes to a lot of guitar shows, and I have a lot of stuff in my storage, repairs and whatever, even stuff that aren't repairs that I like. I like old PV amps. I like weird eclectic stuff because I see a lot of the commons just all day long at the shop. So I like the oddball. Oh, I've never seen that. I can't find it on the internet. I like that, you know. And so I offered him about 4 or 5 things for this Gretsch that he could sell at his booth at the guitar, you know, like the Amigo guitar show happens in San Francisco and LA and maybe elsewhere, but talking about the LA one, that would sell, that would exceed the cost of this. So I offered him a PV. It's not a Deuce, but it's like a Deuce 212 from the 80s, and it has the colorful knobs and it has power tubes. I don't think it has any preamp tubes, which is interesting. You know, this one's in mint condition with the foot switch, and as a player, this guy isn't a player, but as a player, it sounds incredible. The reverb sounds incredible. That's why I like some solid state PVs, because what I realized when I was younger, for me, the sound of a tube amp, because I'm a reverb guy, what I realized a lot of that was the reverb. And then when I got older and I understood it more, I understand about the sag and the compression of tubes and how more present solid state is, which I do like anyways. So yeah, I'd probably, 4 for that. And then I offered him a vintage Decade. Man, those new Josh Homme ones have really downed the price of the vintage ones. But that might be worth like around, I don't know, like, let's just say, for argument's sake, like 2, So you got 4, 5, 6, and then I offered him a Vega arch top it's probably from the early 40s, definitely 50s, and that I valued at at least $1,000, because that's what I paid for it. So you got 14, 15, 16. So there's 16 right there, and I offered him a Japanese Aria. That looks like, it kind of looks like, it's like the Epiphone that Kurt Cobain played, the ET-270. It looks like that, but it has a Strat style headstock, and it's pretty minty. It's a very cool one. People would buy that one. I would put that at least, I'm giving him bro deals here. I'm not asking full pop. I'm trying to bundle stuff. So that's like at least 4, I think. So you got, what did I say, 16 or 17? Let's say I said 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, so anyways, and I probably would have even offered him something else. So like, I was offering him all this stuff, he still wouldn't do it. But now I hear that he might take 2, but it's like, first of all, I already have one. And I had a reissue that I gave to my dad. So I have, one of my own, one in the family. And I don't need a third, but I'm a Gretsch guy, and that's super cool. And anyways, that was something interesting that happened. Something else, there was this double cut Les Paul that I had in my storage forever. It actually belongs to my shop, and I was going to fix it up, and I just hadn't gone around because we thought it was a copy. And it turns out that guitar is not a copy. It had been refinned, and the neck I always thought was super slim. Like, I understand 60s Gibson necks, but it just felt kind of flat and just not right. Anyways, we looked at it at the time 3 years ago and thought might be Gibson, probably a copy that's converted with the Gibson decal on the top. It turns out after 3 years of not thinking about it, looking at it again, you can see that holes were plugged and stuff, and it was refinned, and it was a I think it was I think it was turned into a special, or it was a I don't know, but definitely an extra pickup was added and a couple knobs were added. But that's a 60s double cut Gibson. I think it's a special that I'm going to be fixing up coming up. And yeah, I'm super stoked on that. Funny story. We had what I thought was a 54 Les Paul roll in, because they rolled in before. It's not crazy. And I was like, wow, the 70s really happened to that one. There's like a brass nut and a, maybe Stars Guitars bridge or something like that. There's all this brass all over it, gold Grovers. And I for a week, I thought that it was a 52, it has the staple pickup in the neck. Turns out they were reissuing the 52 in the 70s. So it was the 70s. That didn't hang around the shop long. And, yeah, anyway, lots of repairs, lots of stuff. Tomorrow I'm going to go back into work and stuff that wiring harness fresh into that Epiphone Casino. He got vintage tuners, 50s wiring, boutique, P90s, and then a Graphtec nut. Man, a bone nut would look good on that thing, but, it's not my guitar. But thank you for listening to this podcast. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. The sun's still out. I think I'm going to walk around the lake before it gets too dark. And yeah, I'll be coming back at you next time with customer stories. And, I'd like to do recent guitar news, like to talk more about marketplace, and maybe even some customer psychology, talking about how to talk to customers and really give them what they want. Maybe even do some myth busting, as low as you can go without any buzz, what that's about. And maybe even when people call me a luthier. Am I a luthier? What is a luthier? I think that would be a fun topic. Got lots to talk about. Thank you for tuning in. I don't even think I even told you guys who I am. My name is Kenny Hill. On socials and YouTube, I go by Kenneth Hillington or Hillington Guitars, and that's just kind of like a fun nickname, but my name is Kenny Hill. There just so happens to be a famous Kenny Hill guitar builder, so I might have to go by my nickname. I don't know. Anyway, signing out for now. See you next time. Thanks. Later. See ya.